Welcome to Candidates Night. Hi. Welcome to Candidates Night. I'm Barbara Howie, president of the Sunderland Women's Club. For you that I have a brief information on the Women's Club. Our club was established in 1894. We have approximately 100 active members. Any woman residing in Sunderland or surrounding towns is eligible for membership. If anyone here, or if you know anyone who's interested in joining, please let me know. I would like to thank you all for supporting our Candidates Night and showing interest in our town with the questions you submitted. At this time, I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Harrison Gregg from Amherst. Thank you, Harrison, for agreeing to be our moderator. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Barbara. I think I'll let you know in 2 hours whether I still thank you. But, I also want to thank Margaret for recommending me, and of course the club, the Women's Club of Sunderland, for inviting me to moderate this debate between the two candidates for selectmen. The rules are pretty simple. We're going to begin with opening statements, and we flipped a coin, so Mr. Murphy is going to go first on the opening statement. And we'll end with closing statements, for which Mr. Pierce will go first. In between, we'll have a series of not very easy questions provided by the Women's Club. And I will read the question and give each candidate a chance to respond. All the responses and the opening and closing statements will be 3 minutes each. And we have a timer here who will let us know when there's 1 minute left. But what we will do on the questions is we will alternate who goes first with each question. The first question, Mr. Pierce will go first, and then Mr. Murphy will go first, and so forth. That's about it. If we still have time left after we've gone through all these questions, we'll open it to the audience for further questions. Meanwhile, the floor belongs to the two candidates and the moderator, and if you have any comments to make on what they have to say, well, you can leave those for later on after the program. Any questions? Okay, well, I guess we'll begin with the opening statements, and we'll call first on Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Harrison and Barbara and the Women's Club, and thanks everybody for coming. And I hope there's a bunch watching TV. My name is Pete Murphy. I live on North Main Street, Sunderland. I've lived in and out of town since 1964. I'm running for selectman. I've been watching the town politics for a number of years, and I first want to commend all of the selectmen, people who chair departments, run on different groups in the town. It's a difficult position. But the reason I'm running for selectman is I feel that I don't agree with the direction of the board in every aspect and what their priorities are. And I worked at UMass for 42 years. I'm retired. I was in a management position. We had a lot of tough years with big budgets, just like the town is facing now. And we had to look for ways to do more with less. And one of the things that's happened over the years, and I don't see this happening in town in terms of fixing it, but you have a bunch of groups who have special interests. You have people who want to make sure that the library is fully funded, and we have a great library. I hear that from people outside of town, different towns. The fire department, the police department. And when their budgets get cut, people go to the town meeting and their focus is more on that particular line item than it is on the common good for the whole town. What I would bring as selectmen is I think we have to mediate that in a sense of trying to get people to agree, okay, well, this year maybe we can help the police, next year when we can help the firemen. We need to spread the hurt, is what I call it. I mean, we need to, our priorities right now, and I don't think it's the right priority, is the police are not funded to the level they were in 2008. But all the other departments have almost the same or higher budget right now than they had in 2008. I don't think that's right. When I call 911, I want to know that somebody's going to show up. If you think about that budget, I mean, how can we be getting the same service 5 years later with all the training they need? They spend a lot of time in court. So if I was selectman, the public safety would be my priority, and I would make sure that they had a sufficient budget to operate to the fullest of their abilities to make sure that we get the service that we deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Ends your time, so now turn to Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to first thank the Women's Club, obviously, for having this tonight, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and anybody who's at home watching. I'm obviously a selectman right now, and I'm running for re-election. This has been my first term. I moved to the town of Sunderland in August of 1999 after a long search for a home in the area. The following April, I decided it was time to get involved in the town, and I chose to volunteer at that time for the Conservation Commission. And I spent nearly 10 years on the Conservation Commission, and I learned a great deal in that time. I've always been a big believer in public service, and by public service, I don't just mean political offices that people often associate with public service, but I also mean getting involved at the local level in your own town by joining a board or a committee, especially at the volunteer level. And that means boards like the Rec Committee, the Fall Festival Committee, and even the Ditch Committee, and we've got that one coming up. So if anybody wants to volunteer, they can let me know. It's gonna be a real humdinger of a committee, so. And why did I run in the first place? Well, I ran initially at the suggestion of a number of folks, and kind of reluctantly at first, because I was concerned about the time commitment, because you do spend a lot of time doing it, that's for sure. And I'd like to thank my wife and my kids for supporting me in that, because you need a lot of backing and support for doing something like this that's just besides yourself. And kind of along the lines of what Mr. Murphy was saying, being a selectman is more than just essentially coming to a weekly meeting. It's also being a selectman, being on the Board of Selectmen. Also, you enjoy the privilege of being on a number of other boards, like contract negotiation groups, regional selectmen's, and municipal groups. And by this point in the year, there's usually at least 3 meetings a week that we're attending. And as a matter of fact, at least one other board member is right now over at in Deerfield. Is it Deerfield or Conway? Yeah, it's attending the capital budget for Frontier, because I'm sure we're all. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And why am I asking for your vote? And I'm running for a second term. In this job, I think it takes a good full term just to get a foundation of knowledge, so that you've at least got some working knowledge. And for that, I've got to thank the hardworking staff and everybody at Town Hall who's helped me out, and especially Margaret, our town administrator. I think I've really just begun getting started with a lot of the things that I'd like to accomplish for the town, in addition to regular day-to-day duties, let's say, of being a selectman. In the town budget, we've been working on a lot of other short and long-term goals, and we can probably get into those, I'm sure, in some of the questions. But I'm probably just about out of time, aren't I? So I'm going to probably stop right there. 15 seconds. Well, I'll stop right there.
Okay, the first question actually sounds like it might be an extension of what you've been talking about already, which is, what made you decide to run for selectman? So we'll start with Mr. Pierce, and he can continue what he was going to say.
Well, I've always had an interest in town government, and I think it's important to, I've always believed that in the democracy and everything, just showing up, like just living, paying your taxes, and once in a while showing up to vote is not really enough. A democracy takes a lot of participation, just like any other relationship in your life. And anybody who's been married for a long time probably knows what that's like. You know, it's very important to participate and get involved. And I see a lot of folks here, which is great, and there's probably a lot of people watching at home. And it's not really enough to just occasionally pop into a town meeting and, you know, when you're angry about one particular topic. I mean, we all have our hot button topics and things like that, but you really need to be involved all the time. And looking around this room, I see a lot of the same faces that I see usually doing the things in town. You know, we've got some of our fall festival committee folks and a number of other board folks and everything. And it usually ends up being a small pocket of people doing the bulk of the work. And it really needs to be more people getting involved in the work of the town. There's a lot of that going on. And I thought it was very important to get involved in the workings of the town and pitch in where I can. And I think the last 3 years that I've been in there, I basically started sort of with a trial by fire, because I got a call after the election that following Monday from Tom Fine-Kevis and said, can you come down to Main Street, because we had a whole bunch of power lines down, and we had lost power from one of the, I think it was probably the first of our microbursts that we had that year. So it's been an interesting 3 years. I think I've enjoyed the last 3, and that's why I'm running again. 1 minute, okay, thank you. Essentially, the point I was trying to make on that is I'm actually glad that the last 3 years have been probably the toughest that this town has seen in a long time, because in some ways it's a lot easier when you're doing a job like this when the budget is not as tight as it is. And I think it's very challenging to figure out how to deal with this, and we've really had to try to work to think outside of the box to figure out ways to deal with things. And that's one of the tough things. I mean, you could essentially automate an Excel spreadsheet to balance the budget, but that's not why we're here. We have to really think about that, and occasionally we make cuts in areas, and we're slowly trying to build things back up to where they were. But it's not an easy thing.
Mr. Murphy?
The reason I ran was a lot of the reasons I said in my opening statement, but the main reason I'm running is I believe we need change in town. We have to try and get people together as a community, and I believe that we can sustain and keep the same kinds and levels of services that we have with finding a way to bring income to the town. We have the old fire station that we've given to the water district. That could be a revenue building. The water district has a lot of money, and we're letting them use the building for practically nothing. And trying to get the groups together, like even, I think one of my big things is we have a lot of students that are in town, and I've talked to them in the last couple months about this, and I think if we get more volunteerism, and like David said, it's always the same faces that come to all these meetings. We need to get more people to participate. And I think to do that, you have to go out and you have to reach out to them. It's nice that our weekly meetings are publicized on television, but it's hard for a lot of people to come in and voice their opinions and tell you how they really feel. I think we need to reach out to them. And we need to go out and talk to the different groups that have their special interests and see if we can't make some kind of common ground for the better of the whole community. And we could use a lot of help here, but I think we need to reach out for that. And I think, like David said, I mean, a lot of what the selectmen do, there's a lot of work, they spend a lot of time, but I think as a part of that group, there needs to be an outreach to a lot of people that aren't willing to come forward.
Next question is, if elected, what goals would you have for the town during your tenure as selectman? And we'll start this one with Mr. Murphy.
The goals I would have for my term would be for somebody to say, that's the guy that brought the town together, and that when we have a meeting like this, we'd have to bring in extra chairs in the back like we used to have meetings 40 years ago. Probably a lot of you weren't here back then, but there was a lot of open debate. There was a lot of people that had an interest in the town, and you don't see that anymore. So my goal would be to make this a better place. And to make it, you know, people think we're very, and we are very lucky. We have a nice town, we have a beautiful library, we got a good school system, but we need to get people involved. And I think that needs to be a part of the selectmen's job, is to get that out, to the outreach to people.
Mr. Pierce?
Yeah, I think we actually, the selectmen, one of the things we do is that we actually come up with short and long-term goals that we've been working on. I'll start off with some of these here. One of the things that we're looking at is actually we've been working with Whately in terms of perhaps consolidating schools. That's one of the things we've had some meetings on. One of the things that we're still working on is trying to resolve the Sugar Bush issue down on the corner of 116 and Plumtree. That's still an ongoing issue. And one of the other things that I've had as a goal, and I actually just put it live on Sunday, if anybody's had the chance to look, the new town website is up. That's been one of my goals for a while. I wish it could have got up a little sooner, but I've been pretty busy, so. But that one, actually, that's up, and I actually designed and built that whole site myself, and we ended up saving, in the first year alone, probably $2,000 or $3,000 just by doing that. And one of the next things that I'm really trying to look at is to get some better technology in the town, because I'd like to bump us up a little bit towards at least, you know, the early 90s or so technologically, you know. We're getting there, but because it actually helps, and it, especially if we can start using some other ways to really cut down on paper, because I've seen the amazing amounts of paper that we have to generate and everything. That's one of the things I want to cut down on. One of the goals also, if anybody's been following, is our solar panels that we've got going in town. We're going to end up saving approximately around, I think the latest figures, let's say between $13,000 and $14,000 a year that we'll be receiving an income from lease and a pilot deal on that, which is fantastic. And that essentially is designed to cover right about the average electricity use of the town. One of the things that we've also looked at, which we still may look at, is getting a new pavilion behind the town hall area. And also, you know, talking about bringing business, this is one of my key things, and actually it's tied into the website too, is I'm going to be launching a section on there for getting businesses to come to town, because this is a fantastic place to locate. And I've got actually some wonderful little statistics if we want to look at that. I can get into that probably in a later question, but one of my goals is to get the Economic Development Committee back up and running, and we really need to get more businesses in town. So, I'm probably about done on that. 25 seconds? Oh, okay. Well, and also, actually, and just in general, I'd say marketing the town, because I know why I came here, but I think this town, like any other product, we do need to market the town if we're going to get businesses here, get people to move here. And like anything else, we do need to get a lot of newer, younger families to want to move to Sunderland.
Okay, this question is a little longer. We're going to begin with Mr. Pierce. Please give a specific example from recent town history of an act of good government. Please also give an example of a recent town government action, after all, nobody's perfect, that you think was or is detrimental to the interests of town citizens. Mr. Pierce?
Okay. I think, actually, I can probably use one example that was probably would cover both, and I think that would be the fabulous October blizzard that we had. I think we did some good things in terms of responding to that, but I think we also learned a number of things out of that. It was a freak storm and a surprise, certainly, and one of the good things is we have been training and doing a lot of drills on emergency things and everything, but we ended up having to set up a shelter down at the school. And it's times like that you really get to see how people work around town and everything, and I think everybody came together pretty well on that. We worked with the National Guard and everything. We went around and did call-outs. I know Wendy was riding around, our town clerk, with a lot of the National Guardsmen, making sure that people were okay. But it also, it shows you some of the weaknesses and things that you can improve in town, as far as how we responded to that. You know, you could probably say every year that maybe how we did, you know, dealing with the budget, you could always work better on that. That's always a constant challenge. Because every year we try, and this is one of the discussions that's going on tonight, is the burden that the schools end up putting on there, because, you know, you struggle, roughly 70% of the budget is essentially for the school. And I know the town of Dudley has put forth an amendment for the Chapter 70 funding to approach how that's dealt with, because we do end up having to essentially make cuts in the remaining 30% of the budget, which is your police, your fire, your highway department. So that's one thing that, you know, we can always improve on as far as that goes, is the budget.
Mr. Murphy, an example of recent town government action that was good and one that was detrimental.
I think on the government action, the school, they've got it set up where it could be a place in case of a disaster, and it can hold, I think, 300 or 400 people. The it has a generator. The fire station, I believe, has a generator. They're equipped for some kind of civil defense disaster. I think we're one of the few towns in the area that if something happened like that we could even probably take people in from other towns. The town and selectmen have done a great job with preparing for that, you know, with the help of the fire, the police. In terms of doing things better, it's like David says on the budget. I think they keep saying that we argue and we talk about 30% of the budget. I think it's about time that we started spending more time on that other 70%. I don't believe that there, in the 4 million, whatever the figure is of the 70%, that there isn't a way to get some of that money and bring it over to the 30%. You can't keep talking about the 30%. You have to look at the 70%. And I think with the 70%, you could get volunteerism. You could talk to the university and have people come in here with internships and stuff that would help out the schools. I don't think that 70% is untouchable. And I think that it's about time somebody spent more time looking at that, because there isn't a lot of fat, or there isn't a lot of more cutting that you can do in the 30%.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Martin, do we get rebuttals or anything, or?
Well, not officially.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
But you can work it into your next statement.
That's okay.
The next question is, as a member or future member of the sewer commissioners, what is your stance on the request to extend the sewer lines to the southern part of town? Let's see, this will be Mr. Murphy going first.
With the sewer, and again, I haven't been in the selectman's office, so I'm not sure of discussions about it, but if, in terms of extending the sewer line, if it was affordable, I believe that we should try to do whatever we can to help get everybody on the sewer, if it's possible. I don't think we should restrict it to what we have now, providing that we can afford it and then people be charged for it.
Is that the end of your statement? Okay, Mr. Pierce?
It's definitely something worth looking at, which is why we're doing it. One of the, we're gonna have to grapple as a town, and this gets into, kind of ties into our master plan, but one of the things you have to grapple with in terms of expanding the sewer is, and it depends on where you look, is does that cause too much development? That's one question. That's a number of questions that people have. But also, it's also gonna help with bringing businesses and other things to the town. As somebody who owns a septic system, it would be nice in a lot of ways to have a sewer, but it does get expensive, and typically what ends up, the way you end up paying for it would be like a betterment on the property. But it's clearly something that we need to look at, and I don't think we'd be able to do the entire town because it would probably be cost prohibitive. But especially when you're coming down along near the river and everything, anything that you can do to keep septic flows and things from getting towards the river, that's always a very good thing. But I think the infrastructure is very important in the town. I mean, you hear infrastructure being talked about at the state level and the federal level, and it's very important for the citizens in the town and also for attracting and maintaining businesses in the town. And it's one of the key things in terms of making the quality of life better in town. As to whether it actually ends up going in, we'll have to see how that goes, but we're working on the engineering studies and things like that right now, so that'll be coming up at a number of other meetings in the future.
Okay, here's a long question, a historical question. Includes a quotation from James Madison from 1792. It's about the stretch code. The stretch code compels citizens who wish to develop, improve, or make basic modifications to their homes and businesses to abide by the state's green agenda. Do you believe that the state or town should have authority to force its citizens to do this? If so, how do you square your belief with this quote of James Madison, author of the Bill of Rights? Here's Madison. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where the property which a man has in his personal safety and personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the rest. And the second part of the question is, if not, that is, if you cannot square this with James Madison, would you support rescinding the stretch code? There you are, Mr. Pierce.
All right. I'm a big fan of Madison, so I actually can square that with that, because what Madison was speaking about there was not essentially about the stretch code, because I will say that the stretch code at the town level gets voted in by the citizens of the town, so it is not something that's arbitrarily enforced. Was this your question, Will? It was it? When I looked at the stretch code, I kind of went back and forth a lot about it too, but I think it doesn't, and I've got a nice little summary copy here if we have any questions. I know how you feel about this guy, but I think this is one of those things that in the end will be good in terms of, this is difficult. I know, because you can make on one hand an argument that, this is kind of like Mr. Bloomberg trying to legislate what kind of, this is what some people say is like Mayor Bloomberg is trying to say, well, you can't be drinking large sodas. And that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think the stretch code is good in that it's one of these things where you can extrapolate out that it does create more jobs and things like that. And you can argue, sure, well, it's going to create more jobs for builders and things like that. But generally, most of the things that I've looked at in here, you end up saving the money in a very short period of time when you look at what's there, especially for general residential buildings. And also, one of the reasons why I voted for it too is that after looking at it, I think after a while it may not be as good in terms of building efficiencies, because after a little while it'll get tougher and tougher to achieve those efficiencies. And one of the things that we can do is we can rescind it after a while if it looks like it's not meeting the needs in terms of being able to be easily achieved. But I think overall it's going to help out with energy savings, and one of the things that's helped is, I'm just looking at some of the statistics here, there's 121 communities in the town that have adopted the stretch code. And actually of those, and there's only 103 green communities, so a number of towns didn't even essentially get onto the green community, or maybe they're still working on it. But a number of towns that aren't green communities adopted the stretch code, so I think that says something to the effectiveness of the stretch code. And every now and then we do need a little nudge, and sometimes that things like that help us. And it also, it's made the state the #1 state in the country for energy efficiency for 2011 and 2012. And I think energy efficiency, and this kind of stretches out to the national level, but I'll just stop there.
Okay, Mr.
Can
Murphy.
you read the first part of your question again?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
The stretch code compels citizens who wish to develop, improve, or make basic modifications to their homes and businesses to abide by the state's green agenda. Do you believe that the state or town should have the authority to force citizens to do this? If so, how do you square your belief with a quote from James Madison, author of the Bill of Rights, who said, "That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where the property which a man has in his personal safety and personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the rest." And if not, would you support rescinding the stretch code?
I don't think the town should mandate it, or the state. I think it should go along the lines of recycling, where you educate people, you explain to them the savings. There's a lot of people in town that are on fixed incomes that can't afford to do these kind of modifications. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's gonna, save energy. It's a positive thing, but I don't think it should be mandated by the state or the towns. But I also think that it would be important for the town to educate people on what it is, and if there was any way to help them with it, to go forward with it.
Okay. The next question will begin with Mr. Murphy. Here's the question. Selectmen have to attend local and regional meetings outside the regular Monday meeting schedule. This invariably impacts one's free time. Would you be able to commit to these obligations as a selectman? Mr. Murphy?
The answer to that would be yes. I'm retired from UMass, and my job was, I was responsible for the residential areas on campus 24/7. I was, if it's your responsibility to be somewhere, you would be there. I've done it for a lot of years. I look at my wife and thank her for putting up with it, and now I'm going to ask her if I'm elected to put up with it again. But but I think it goes along with the job, and I think you can balance your free time.
Mr. Pierce?
In short, yes, I've been doing that for the last 3 years. I know what it's like, because I work at home 2 days a week, but the rest of the week I have a very long commute. I commute out to Westboro, so it's about an hour and 40-minute drive. So I'm pretty familiar with the long hours that are involved in it, and it's just part of the job, and that's what you have to do to get things done. And then also it'll be like those calls that I got when all the power lines were down. There's sometimes where you're just going to get calls in the middle of the night or wherever there's a problem, and that's just part of what the job entails.
Okay, Mr. Pierce begins this one. A long question. Recent overrides have failed. This question presumes that one reason for the failures is that not enough citizens believe that expenses are adequately controlled, and that school budgets in particular are not adequately controlled or explained. Thus, citizens vote no, not because they want to hamstring public servants, but because a no vote is the only way they can limit spending and control school budgets. How would you endeavor to verify that school budgets are at least as well scrutinized and controlled as are the budgets of the town government and the highway and police departments? And if in fact they are, how would you convince the more skeptical town voters that this is the case? Beginning with Mr. Pierce.
I would say that I disagree with the fact that there isn't close scrutiny. We've got 2 school committees that look at the budget. I definitely agree that there's been a lot of friction because of the budgets and the way it's structured, especially in a regional school like this. And as a matter of fact, I'm here and I'm not at a meeting that we've got over in Deerfield about that very topic. Everybody who's been in this town knows what we went through, especially in 2009, where we had the formula adjustment and where we really got hammered in our budget. And right now, a couple of our fellow communities across the river are going through the exact same thing. And we had attempted to get them to the table before, and I think finally it's taken them to go through the same type of financial crises that we've been going through to realize that, okay, we need to sit down and look at this. And that's one of the issues that we're trying to look at, is how to control and keep the school part of it within a reasonable amount. But on the other hand, I definitely disagree with the fact that there is no oversight. Or we actually, I think we do a reasonably good job of getting the information out there for the budget. Anybody who wants to look at it, check out the website. You'll right on the front page, you can click in and look at the budget. Unlike a state or federal budget, as you can see when you look at it, there's not a lot of places to hide things. We don't have much to really waste, essentially. But I think there's going to be a lot more talk about that very issue, about the school budget and how we can deal with that piece of it. But on the flip side, we have to remember too that one of the key things is I don't have enough time to discuss the importance of education. That's a whole other topic. But it is intricately tied into the property values of every one of our homes as well. So you have to balance all of that out when you're thinking about things like that. I'm probably done, all right.
Mr. Murphy?
It is a problem, and that's why we keep going for overrides and they keep failing. What I would do, and I think what needs to be done, is I think everybody knows that everybody wants a good education, and I personally haven't looked at the school budget item by item, but in order to talk to that person that keeps voting down the overrides and stuff, I think what you need to do is first I would need to understand the budget. I'd have to look at it, and if I couldn't see any way of cutting anything, I would go to that person or persons. I think you need to go out to the people that keep voting down the overrides, and you have to ask them specifically what they're talking about. Sit down and show the numbers to them. I know it takes time. Right now, you can get the budget, it's online, but I think you have to go out and you have to talk to those people, and you have to show them the importance of why we're asking for the override and find ways to make that happen.
Mr. Murphy will be first on the next question. How would you respond to requests you may hear from acquaintances to move their personal agendas forward through your official capacity as selectman?
I would tell them that there's a procedure for getting things moved forward, and I believe it's to go through Margaret and have it scheduled with the selectmen. I think that whatever request a person has, they should be able to get to the board. I wouldn't take care of it on my own personally. I'd have them come in front of the board.
Yes.
Well, could you read the question again? It's kind of worded oddly. Yeah. It's very vague.
How would you respond to requests you might hear from acquaintances to move their personal agendas forward through your official capacity as selectman?
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I gather they're trying to get at, getting somebody a job or something like, is that, in terms of that, is...
I didn't write the question.
Yeah, I don't, right, like nepotism, things like that. I'm not a big fan of that, which is probably why I'll never end up going far in politics. So I don't think that's probably not going to get me too far. But yeah, I mean, we've got essentially official channels for everything. That it's a bit of a vague question, so it's difficult to. I mean, essentially you've got to follow all of the procedures. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble and cause a lot of other issues. So I think that's about all we can really say about that question because of the way it's worded.
Okay. Mr. Pierce goes first on this one. As a selectman, how would you try to ensure that regional entities to which the town pays assessments comprehensively understand the town's revenue limitations under Proposition 2.5?
I'll take it that that question was directed at the school. That's generally the regional entity. I think they all have a very good understanding of usually where the budgets are, but that's one of the things that we're trying to do through a lot of these meetings that we've been going through lately. But I think the only other, trying to think if there's any other regional groups like that, but it's really mostly the school. Well, I think I'll stop there because essentially it's just kind of a rehash of that same question in terms of the school, really. Because that's essentially the main regional group that we've got, so.
Murphy?
Could you read that question again?
As a selectman, how would you try to ensure that regional entities to which the town pays assessments comprehensively understand the town's revenue limitations under Proposition 2.5?
What I would do, and I think what happens, and Sunderland's done a good job of it, is to start the process early on. The budgets are set way ahead, and make sure that the school understands our position for that coming year, that we only have so much money. And when they go to do their budgets, I think it's important for them to know what our budget is gonna be. And like David said, it's all about the schools or the tech school. But I think there's this, they kind of do it in reverse. So I think they need to understand our revenue base.
Okay, Mr. Murphy, you go first on this one. Former Selectman Al Koblinski has pressed the current Board of Selectmen several times about the importance of maintaining the network of ditches which help drain spring melt from low-lying farmland. Do you think the Select Board should work to maintain the ditches, or are the ditches a relic from Sunderland's agrarian past that can now be abandoned? Mr. Murphy?
I used to love to see Al come to the meetings, and this has been one of his pet peeves for years. And I think the ditches should be cleaned. It takes the flow right off of the hill up above, and there used to be peepers over here by the library, by the post office and stuff. And it also makes it a swamp area down by the school if we don't do that. So I think we should, and we have a highway department, and they used to do things like that.
Mr. Pierce?
I agree, it's definitely been one of Al's pet peeves, and for some reason, when I keep mentioning it to him, he doesn't want to volunteer for the ditch committee, so we need to work on getting him on that ditch committee. One of the things, there's a project going on right now with the Conservation Commission, and I also spent a day, back when I was on the Conservation Commission, an entire day walking ditches in town, and that was a good time. We definitely need to do something about it, and we are working on a plan, but I will say that it's not as simple as just figuring out who owns the ditches, where they are. That's the very first step that you have to figure out. And because a lot of this is, I guess I'll say, steeped in the history of land ownership in the town, there's gonna be a lot of work, and it won't be cheap. And this is one thing I wanna stress, it's one of these projects that if we wanna tackle it, we have to go through all of the work, figure out what it's gonna cost in the end, and there'll be a lot of homework that needs to be done on it. And then people have to decide if they wanna pay for it. It's clearly very important because it's not just a relic of the agricultural community, because we still are an agricultural community. And also, too, a number of developments that have gone in certain areas over the years have essentially simply messed with the drainage issues, and people who have lived in and around the ditches have also filled them in and done things that they shouldn't have and contributed to some of the problems that we have today. So it's definitely an issue that's on one of our goals that we've been working on. It's just not, unfortunately, you can't go in and just get a piece of equipment and start digging out ditches, because there's a lot of homework you have to do. And now, compared to years ago, there's a lot more environmental laws that we have to adhere to. So it makes the process a little more cumbersome, to say the least. But Al, if you're watching, come on down, volunteer. It's very important, especially if somebody's got an interest like that. That's a perfect thing to get them involved in, you know?
I understand Sunderland was once known as Swampland,
It's a rumor, but
Swampville?
yes, Swampfield, yes.
Swampville. That must have been before you had the ditches.
There's a reason why it's called Swampfield. There's no question
Was it
about that.
Swampfield?
Swampfield, yes. It's a natural drainage area from all of the mountains right down to the river, so. That's right. We won't get into.
Swampfield.
That's right.
What an honor.
Not enough time to
Okay.
get into that, but.
All right, now this one, first one is, Mr. Pierce has the first answer to this one. As a selectman, how would you address declining volunteerism and employee morale due to increasing mandates and citizen demands? As a selectman, how would you address declining volunteerism and employee morale due to increasing mandates and citizen demands? Mr. Pierce?
Okay, that's a good question. As far as I know, we don't have any major morale issues in terms of, I assume we're talking about the employees in town. I'm not aware of any major morale issues out there. Volunteerism, that's a fascinating topic. You know, we get into Madison and a bunch of other folks. One of my sort of thoughts is democracy has got three big enemies generally: fear, ignorance, and apathy. And apathy is one of the big problems in this country that I see. And it's not, I wouldn't point it at being, you know, younger kids are more apathetic or older folks are more apathetic. I think in general it's a bit of a problem. And people do tend to not get involved and sit around and complain. It's much easier to complain about things than to get involved and help out and solve a problem. That's usually a lot more work, and I think one of the things is people would rather sit around and, you know, toss stones at people and complain about things than get involved. I think volunteering is great. It's a fantastic thing, and I can't encourage people enough to get involved, whether it's at a political level or whether it's at a, you know, some type of community service. I think we really need to do more of it. And that's one of the things that's helped make this country great over the years. And I think the more it declines, the more our society declines. And I can, you know, you talk about outreach. I mean, we're always trying to get people involved, but it's a difficult thing because people, especially now, you run into things that we didn't have years ago. Most families have 2 working members in it. So that does cut down on terms of volunteerism. But, you know, sometimes you do have to pick and choose things in life and make sacrifices for a bigger goal. And I think I heartily encourage people to get involved. It's a very important, and it can be very rewarding. It can be frustrating too, you know, for those, you know, anybody who sits in on the budget meetings and things like that. But it's something that's worth doing, and it's important. And I think it's one of the bedrock things of our country.
Mr. Murphy?
Like David said, I don't know if there's a morale issue, but I would imagine that there is one, because we've asked people who work for this town full-time to take pay cuts. In terms of how you fix that, you can't fix it, but I think a pat on the back and telling them that you appreciate what they do, and I think if residents come in and tell them, you know, we understand, you know, your pay has been cut, that's got to be a morale boost. You know, it's got to be difficult. And it's similar to the university. I mean, there's years where you don't get raises, so a pat on the back or a thank you goes a long way. In terms of volunteerism, and that's very difficult. I mean, a lot of the same people that are in here, you see at every meeting. And what I would do, and I think we need to do, is there's a big student base from the universities, and if you ask them, I think they might be willing to volunteer in town. And I also would like to see us reach out to the younger people in town. It seems like it's I don't want to say your generation, mine, but anyway, the group here are the ones that do all the volunteering. How about our kids that are like just in high school, seniors? You know, try to get them involved in town, and that's going to help them for the town to move forward. So I think we have to look at a different base of who we want to volunteer, because I think what's happening now is, like David said, you know, most people work and 2 people work in a family. I think we need to reach out to a different group.
Okay, Mr. Murphy goes first on this one. Should the town be allowed to assess $75K in extra real estate taxes to fund a capital expense stabilization fund?
I definitely believe that we need a stabilization fund. I'm not sure that 75,000 is the right number. It's been asked every year. It gets turned down. I believe maybe we start out with a little lower number, but I also believe that it should have a plan with it. Like, what are we gonna do? What's our goal for that fund? I mean, I know, is it gonna be a rainy day thing that if something happens, we fix it? I think people would probably vote more for something that had a specific reason than just like, let's start piling up a bunch of money for whatever's gonna happen.
Pierce?
In short, yes, but it's up to the town to actually decide that. We have a capital fund already. The issue is actually funding that account. We actually have a capital plan. We have, and this is just the summary, we actually go right now to fiscal year 2018. And I'm looking at a lot of things on there. We've actually been working on this very hard. And one of the things, the reason we try to put it out there is we spend roughly about $90,000 every year on capital projects. And so as you can see, that's less than the $75,000. And the reason we're trying to use an override mechanism is to guarantee that that money gets put aside for capital spending, because in my mind, it makes a little more sense that if you can at least save up some of that money and at the very least make interest on it while you're working on paying that, working on building up for that particular year, you end up saving some money rather than trying to scramble and take out loans and things like that to do that, especially when we end up spending over that amount every year. And if anybody would like to look at the capital budget, that's on the website. That we've got this year's capital budget, which initially requests for it came in at, I believe, $310,929, and we had to pare that down to $151,907. And if you look, for instance, at fiscal year 15, now, mind you, doesn't mean that these are all going to get approved, but there's been requests totaling up to $1,134,797. Especially with the way the budget's been in the last number of years, we've had to put things off. You know, we all go through that at home in our families where, you know, if you're in tight financial times, you have to put things off. But inevitably, putting off maintenance is going to cost you more in the long run. And that's one of the reasons why. And it is a constant struggle. But you do have to be cognizant of your capital expenditures, and they are very important things that you do need to get done. And anybody who wants to look at the plan, it is out on the website, and that's one of the reasons why we've been really working on the website, is to get more information out in a more easy fashion for everybody. I'll stop there because I could go on and on about capital spending. That's one of my interests as far as that goes. So
We have two more questions left among those that were presented in advance. So those in the audience might wish to be thinking about other questions you want to ask after we finish these two. Second and the last question for Mr. Pierce. As a candidate for selectman, what are your ideas for building unity in the town, a true cohesive sense of community?
that's always a challenge. I do think that we do have a pretty good community as it is. You can always improve it, but I think what comes to mind too, one of the things I think of that helps bring a lot of folks out without any kind of ties towards discussing politics and things like that is the Fall Festival. And I think that's been a really nice thing. It's been improving every year. And I think things like that, and we're also doing the Berkshire to Boston bike race, which will be here in September. That's another great way to get people out to do things. But I think it's the more people get involved in the town and the more involvement they have in the town, I think that's one of the things that helps to bind people together. I think, and I know, you know, there's a number of people, like when I look at, I had I sat in on a Meds Club dinner one night, and I know there's a number of people in that room that had very different opinions, but they all get together. I think there's a lot more unity here than people think. I think it's easy sometimes to focus on certain hot-button issues at a meeting or things like that. I think that's one of the reasons why I picked this town to move to, because I think it's got a great sense of community, and it's got a fantastic location. And I think working on, you know, improving our rec committee, that's another thing that we're trying to improve a lot. Things like that that help us tie us all together, and that things that people use from different facets of life. I think this room right here is a good example of unity, because you've got people from every age group who come in and use this facility. And I think this is a good example of community unity in terms of that. I think and the fact that we're all sitting here in this room is a great thing.
Mr. Murphy?
To build community, I think, like David said, we have a bunch of people here. I would try to talk to the different groups. Like I said, you know, there's different, the library group, the school group, the fire, the police, or whatever, and meet with them on whatever level they were comfortable, and try and bring them to, you know, listen to their issues. If they're not comfortable, everybody coming together, then go out and meet with those different groups and see if you can't build some kind of bonding with the other groups. I think we gotta find a way to get together as a community that's comfortable for everybody.
Yep. The last prepared question, we begin with Mr. Murphy. Do you support a significant increase to the EMS line item to provide a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week paramedic level ambulance service?
If the town can afford it, I definitely do. I know they're negotiating with other towns, and I think that would be a lot cheaper for us to join in with other towns. And from what I've read and what I've heard, that the system could work. I don't know that we could afford it on our own. It would, if we could find ways to support that and pay for that, I definitely would. But I think what's being done now with trying to make it a multiple town operation would financially probably be the best way to go.
Mr. Pierce?
I'm definitely in support of it. We've been working on that for, well, at least a year now. It will cost a little bit more, but the service will be substantially increased. And one of these things is essentially we can't really keep going on the way we're going, because our response times are getting longer, and it's very difficult. You want to talk about difficult getting people to volunteer. It's very difficult to get people to work part-time as an EMT or an ambulance attendant, because it's very difficult because the amount of time that's involved and how that cuts into their work schedule. There's always a challenge getting people to want to do those jobs. And I think I kind of lump ambulance service in with police and fire. It's one of these things that you essentially have to pay and support, and we really hope that we never need any of those three services, honestly. But when we do, we need to know that they're there for us and that they can do their job efficiently. And ambulance services is a very important thing in the town, and you can see towns are struggling with it. And that's one of the reasons why we've been we've looked at, and actually we've been commended for doing this ahead of time rather than waiting until it becomes a severe financial problem. I mean, we're going on okay, but you can see that the pattern is there, that if we keep going the way we're going, it's gonna become very expensive, and our service is not certainly going to improve. So I'm definitely in support of that. And based on the way finances are looking, we will probably be able to fit it in with everything now. But it will cost a little more. But as a community, we have to decide if that's something that we're willing to pay for, if we want better, safe ambulance service.
Okay, we do have a working microphone in the audience, so will that microphone do its job? So if you have a question, please step up to this microphone. We're only halfway through our 2 hours Assign period. Yes, sir.
I have a question. May I speak it from here?
Sure, and I'll repeat it.
This is directed to both candidates. If you lose the election, will you volunteer to serve on another committee or be on another group? And if so, which ones would you consider?
The question is, if you lose the election, would you volunteer to serve on another committee or with another group? And if so, which ones would you choose? We'll start with Mr. Pierce.
Good question. I would say yes. As you can probably tell, I'm not the type to just kind of idly sit back and not get involved in things. So which one would I choose? That's a good question. Well, they're probably going to be looking for people in the ditch committee, I would expect. So that's always a prime choice. You know, I think, I don't know, the fall festival sounds good. Hey, Janet. But that's a good question. I'd have to look at some other ones. But yeah, I would definitely want, I couldn't live in the town and not be involved in it. I just don't, and this is a standard that I'll hold myself to, and everybody has to hold themselves to their own standards, but I just can't not get involved in one way and pitch in, because I think that's just part of what living in a democracy is all about. So it would be a tough choice, though. I'd have to sit down and think about that, but definitely I would still be involved, unquestionably.
Mr. Murphy?
I have more time, so.
I'm sorry, thank you.
If I'm not successful for running, yes, I would volunteer. What committee I would volunteer for is the one that I have a strong belief in, is to try and bring the community together. And I would go out and talk to different groups and try to get them to start moving the town forward with a common goal, and to try and mediate within the groups to see what would be the best for the town. I wouldn't pick any one particular thing to volunteer with, but I really think, and I strongly feel that we need to get young people involved in this town. And I think that would be my volunteerism. And I'm sorry, one more thing is that I definitely would be more vocal with the selectmen on my beliefs. So.
That's good. We need more people, because half the time nobody's in the audience.
We do. I mean, if nothing else, I hope we get more people involved in town.
Can I ask a question from here?
Certainly.
Mr. Murphy and Mr. Pierce, you both talked about outreach and getting people to serve on committees, and that's really wonderful, and it's a fabulous thought, but it's a very hard thing to do. How would you propose to do it?
The question is about outreach. Both candidates have espoused the principle of outreach, but she wants to know how they intend to do it.
Again, the outreach is, I think, it's what I talked about with students. I've talked, there's a few of them in attendance tonight, is to go out and talk to them, to go out and talk to some of the younger people in town, to get them involved. It's difficult, but I think it can be done. I think if you get one or two people excited and they talk to their friends and they get excited. I was talking to a young woman in town who just turned 18, and I said to her, you know, are you gonna come and vote? And she appreciated I asked her that. She said, nobody's ever come to me and said that. I said, you know, I told her how to do it. And I said, go down and she thought that was pretty cool, and she went out and talked to a couple of her friends. And I don't know if they went and signed up. I don't know if Wendy saw them, but I think getting the word out and then having people talk to people, and there's a couple of guys in the attendance out here who've talked to their friends. So I think, I can't do it myself, but.
Are you asking them to come and join in the town government?
I'm asking them to come and help out the town. Like I'm talking about volunteerism. Like I've been talking to some UMass students, and I said if there was an internship in town that was approved by your major, your professor, whatever, would you be interested in doing that? And they said, yeah. They said that we have a real nice community here. I've had also, I had like 50 students work for me, and a lot of them have stayed in the area. They come from Boston or whatever. They say it's a beautiful area to be. I think a lot of people, it's kind of like human nature, people will volunteer. Some will volunteer if you ask them. I mean, they just want to be asked. You know, I mean, you can say at a meeting here, we need volunteers, but if you go out and walk over to a person and say, you've got some nice skills here, you could help us out in this area, would you be interested? You may get 1 out of 10, but 1 out of 10 is better than what you're getting now.
Mr. Pierce?
This may be sort of a captive audience, but I'm starting with my kids. One of the things I'm trying to instill in them is getting involved in community support. I know my son's doing a lot with the Cub Scouts, and I think that's a good thing. And my daughter gets involved in a lot of things. But also, one of the things we need to do is change how we communicate. I think that's because we've kind of gone along and done similar things. And that's one of the things I'm starting to do with the website. And this is another way, right here. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We need to start moving into other forms of communication. That's one of the things I'm trying to start doing with some of the technology in town, because every group is reached a little bit differently. And that's also part of it, and this is one thing I want to kind of segue into another topic too. You want to talk about bringing people together, and this has been one, and this was one of my pet peeves, let's call it, before I was even a selectman. Our master plan has not been updated since 1974. We're starting work on that. If you want to be involved and have some say and talk about how the community, how we think the community should move forward, that's the place to do it. We really need to start working on that. And that's going to be a very big and interesting topic. And I want to start essentially getting us out through like Twitter and a number of other things. We'll essentially eventually have like a Twitter feed right on the website. We got to reach out through different tools. And one of the things too, when I talked earlier about, is marketing the town. This is a fantastic place to live, but we're challenged by the fact that a lot of people go to school in this region. Let's face it, per capita, we have more schools than almost any other area in the country. I'm talking about like higher education. But the problem is keeping people here. We all know when we look at our school attendance, right now we're at, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but we're right around the 1950s in terms of the enrollment levels, right? In front, 1954. So we've got about the same amount of kids in school at Frontier that we had back in 1954. Well, and I mentioned earlier, we need to start bringing younger folks to town because, you know, essentially you just don't want to all age up through the town. We got to keep bringing people here. And marketing the town. I mean, it's like any other thing. We really got to market ourselves, and that's really one of the things that I want to start doing. And I think the Fall Festival is one of the great ways that we've been doing that. Every year we get more and more people there. And I look at like Greenfield, they're doing, I want to say they're doing a barbecue food competition. You know, there's things like that we can do. We can start bringing in more music and essentially turn it into our own little you know, South by Southwest or Coachella kind of thing, you know, where we get a lot more people there. It's, we've got to start, I hate this phrase sometimes because I hear it so often at work, but you got to kind of think outside the box in terms of how we communicate and get information across and appeal to other people, you know?
Other questions?
Oh, come on, somebody's got something else.
Yes.
I want to go back to something Mr. Murphy said, which, by the way, I'm Dave's wife, Judy. I'm not trying to argue, but something you said really triggered something in me, and it had to do with the 70% of the school budget, and that the school budget had to be examined more closely, and that we should consider volunteerism as a way to support support what the school brings into the community. And I have to tell you that when the override failed and the cuts were made to the school budget, that school was like, it was a completely changed animal. And there was definitely a concerted effort to backfill resources and programs with volunteerism, but it was patched and I would say largely ineffective in a way that supported every kid in that school, as opposed to programs that were cut, the music, the art, the library, the media. And I wonder how you can make a comment like that, knowing that we've gone through those cuts without actually having examined the budget and knowing intimately what's in it and what the components are that make up that budget. I think I just want to know, how can you make a comment like that without actually knowing what's in the budget, without not talking to a school committee member about what that budget stands for, without understanding what those cuts did in the school community
So let's give Mr. Murphy a chance to respond. Mr. Murphy?
I guess what I meant was that for me to go out and talk to somebody that says, I need to cut the police budget, I need to cut the fire budget, I need to understand that budget has been looked at. I'm not saying that you haven't done that, and I'm not saying that it's as good as it gets and there is no savings. All I'm saying is that instead of saying every week, like we spend 30%, we spend all our time on 30% of the budget, what would be nice to say is that we've looked at that 70%, and there's absolutely nothing there that we can touch. I don't believe that there's nothing there that you can't touch. It might be in utilities. They might be using the wrong type of lighting.
But I think to make that kind of comment suggests that you've
Okay, let's,
reviewed it or looked at it in some way. And I'm sure that there's room in every budget. I look at my budget, my personal budget, and
Sure.
I say, you know what, there has got to be someplace I
Yeah.
can get another $50 a month or some, whatever it is. And you do have to think in different ways, but I think it's hard for me to understand how you can make a comment like that without having made an effort, at least a minimum
Okay.
effort, to understand.
Mr. Pierce?
That's right.
Uh,
I'm
I mean, my-
familiar
my-
with it, so I get it at home, so.
Yeah.
But, no, one of the things, we do look at, obviously, especially that's one of the purviews of the school committee too. Obviously, they're there to advocate for the school, and we haven't even scratched the surface of education, things like that. But we've been working on what's called like an ESCO project, where we do look at the lighting, the energy usage. That's one of the reasons why the solar panels are out there. And if you drive down, another one of Al's topics, although now they're a lot cheaper, all of those lights, those are all now LED lights. There's always some place, you get to the point essentially where you could probably find a little something to cut everywhere. And this is one of the things that another reason why I probably won't make it in politics, I will never make a pledge to say that, I would never say I won't raise taxes or I won't not raise taxes, because I think that's foolhardy to sit there and make a pledge like that without knowing what's going to happen in the future. All options always need to be on the table, and sometimes it's a matter of cuts or, you have to look at all your options and ways to combine them. One of the things too, we talk about savings like that, we're actually talking with, and they're probably discussing it tonight, using that same ESCO structure over at the school to get all the more efficient lighting over there, because we've had a lot of efficient lighting put in at the school, at town hall, and it's one of those types of deals where the energy, you end up guaranteeing through energy savings your costs and everything. So you're definitely bringing down your costs. And this building right here, this has all high efficiency fluorescent lighting in it. There's been a lot of effort like that. So I think we do it a disservice to say that we talk about the 70%. I think some of the frustration comes in that we don't feel like we have, I think the issue is we don't feel like we have control over that amount. And that's one of the things, and people don't like to feel like they don't have control over it. And I think there's definitely mechanisms there and review of it, so I wouldn't say that it's not reviewed at all. But I definitely understand that there's an impression out there that we don't have control over it, and we are trying to rein in and keep, and this is always a tough balance, but trying to keep them within your 2.5% or your reasonable range like that. Now, if you look at the school budget this year, they're clearly within that. It's the capital budget that's become a bit of a big issue right now. But the school thing, it's so much more complex than you can get into in a short period of time. But it is one of these things that there is a lot of scrutiny done, and I think we do as disservice to say that there isn't, because of all of the hours that people spend discussing that budget.
Mr. Murphy, do you have anything to add to this?
Are you on the school committee? No. No? Okay. I want to try and answer, I'm trying to answer your question. is that, what I'm saying is, there's, you know, all departments are being hit with cuts. The
But I would
police,
say the school's not exempt from that.
oh, it's not, but I would like to say that when you listen to all of that about touching the other departments, and then you say, well, the 70% is stuff that we can't touch. I don't, you know, all I'm saying is, I think that the whole thing should be looked at, and I think that, I don't see that happening, that's all.
Other questions or comments from the audience? Yes, sir.
Another cut at the override question.
Yeah.
The override we were asked to vote on a while back, the one we're talking about now, was a pretty good-sized override.
It was, yep,
right? And
yep.
It was Selectmen's lead that brought us to the point that we had a vote that was either gonna be a big tax increase, there was a big override, there was a huge cut. There wasn't an intermediate proposal. If you had to do this again, have you learned anything, or would you do it differently in terms of what you present to the town as the override? And I'd like to hear both of your answers to that.
I asked the same question at the time, that there should be like a menu. Because there are things that people would definitely vote for, and there's other things that they wouldn't. But again, it gets back, it's like all or nothing, and and if I was elected, I would try to bring like a little of it at a time. I would say, what do we need right now? I mean, what's the, and I don't know if you flip a coin, I mean, I don't know how you do that, but I don't think this all or nothing works, and people can't afford it. But I think we have to look, we need to look for other ways to generate money in town too, so.
Yes.
I will say that there was a lot of discussion back and forth about, you know, going like a menu style thing or an overall override amount. We really tried hard to reflect in that amount what had to be, you know, in other words, you're gonna have to cut all of this. If you wanna maintain these services, this is what it'll essentially cost. And it really comes down to a philosophical discussion, I think, about whether or not you wanna do like a menu item. And it's been tried in some places, and it's had some very negative effects too. And that's one of the reasons why we went back and forth about it, because you wanna talk about bringing people together. Sometimes a menu override thing is one of the worst ways to bring about any unity in town, because you essentially end up pitting groups against each other. And if you're gonna do that, then you may as well just take out the spreadsheet approach and just say, you know, we're just gonna cut everything X%. We have to figure out a way, which we had to do, and essentially, actually at that time I wasn't even on the select board, but you know, you had to sit down and figure out a way to balance that cut out across all of the areas. And I remember standing outside on the street corner with a sign that supporting the police, my son and I. You know, and this is what, if you look at the budget over the last several years, what we've been trying to do. Like you look at the police and the schools, everything is starting to slowly get back up to the services where we were back in 2009. But it's a tough road to hoe, and you know. Nobody ever wants to pay more taxes. I mean, if you ask somebody if they want to have their taxes increased, who on earth is going to say yes? I mean, you know, but I think one of the, and I see the same argument with regulation too. It's either you know, we argue, oh, we pay too much in taxes, or we don't pay enough, or there's too much regulation, or there's not enough. I think oftentimes the real question that you have to ask is it the right amount, and are we doing the right things with what we have, not just is it too much? And taxes are the way we pay for things, and that's the only way we can pay for things. It's a good thing we do need to look at how we spend that money though, so.
Anybody else? Any more questions? Are we allowed to stop early if we don't have any questions? Will forgive us if we do that? Well, it's time then, I guess, for a closing statement from each of the candidates. And Mr. Murphy gave the first opening statement, so Mr. Pierce will give the first closing statement.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and participating, you know. Everybody's probably missing the Celtics playoffs and all sorts of fun stuff like that, but I really appreciate it. I wish I saw some faces that I don't often see, because I do see a lot of the same faces here. Not that I don't love all the faces I see, but hopefully there's more people watching at home. You know, it's been a fascinating 3 years, and there's been a lot of interesting things that have happened in town. And like I said earlier, I think I've been actually glad that I've been here through some really tough times, because I think it's a lot more challenging to deal with the issues that we have to deal with. And, you know, we talk about like budget cuts. I tell you, I heartily suggest, because we by no means have the lock on genius ideas for this. That's why we put this information out on the website. If somebody's got some suggestions and things and new ideas, we'd love to hear them. We need to keep refreshing the ideas that are out there. But I gotta say that, you know, you wanna talk about cuts and things. I know a lot of the cuts hit a lot of the regular workers in town who aren't involved in the schools and other things. Not to say that the schools, believe me, they took their share of cuts too. But I think people in this town work very hard, and I think we have a great crew in town. And I've really enjoyed working with everybody. And I think, you wanna talk about cuts, there were hours cut, and I can relate to this because my company has been cutting. We've had tons and tons of layoffs, so I know what a lot of that is like. But you still have to get the job done. And our town workers have been there day in and day out, still getting the same amount of work done, because we talk about mandates, and I'm not even gonna get into that because there isn't even enough time to get into all of that. But, you know, whether you like mandates and things like that or not, the bottom line is, initially, you still have to deal with them. You still have to figure out a way to get the budget balanced in the short term, and then you can look at changing those things in the long term. But we still gotta get it done, and I think we've got a great crew in town, and I've really enjoyed working with them. And I look forward to, we've got lists and lists of work that has to get done, and I really look forward to trying to get in and continue working on it. And I appreciate your vote, so I can work on the large list of goals and things that we have left to do. So, I'm probably done there, aren't I?
Perfect.
I'd like to thank everybody here and all those watching at home. If nothing else, I hope this brings more people to some meetings. I believe this will give you a choice. You'll have a choice. What I want to do is look for ways to bring money to the town. Things that we haven't talked tonight, and I wish some questions were asked about it, but with the Sugar Bush property down there, the water district, when it was still in the courts, the owner went to the water district and offered them a chance to buy that property. On that property, there's a lot of water, and I believe the selectmen were informed about it too. And that water could have been the backup for Hadley and Amherst, and it would have been a backup for Sunderland should something happen to our water. It was a chance for the town to make money. If we own that property and we own that water, and we could sell the water to Hadley or Amherst if they needed it, that could have brought money into this town. One thing I would do as selectman, if I was elected selectman, is, and I feel for them, they don't have control over the water district. They don't, we own the library, but they don't have control over the use of the library. The library could become a revenue for the town. I mean, it's a town building, we pay taxes for it, and we could get money off of that. So I think that if elected, and the police bothers me a lot. I can't believe that they're being funded at a level lower than they were in 2008. And a lot of things have happened since then. And we talk about the EMS and less responses from the fire department with the ambulance. Well, the police are the first responders. And if they don't have the sufficient funds to do that, I don't understand that. I think that is something that should be looked at, and I think they should be brought up to the level that they need to so that we can get the kind of responses that we deserve. And again, thank everybody for coming.
I would like to thank you all for letting me be a part of this excellent debate, and I wish both candidates well and the town of Sunderland well. And good luck in when is your election? April 30th. April 30th. Well, everybody come out and vote, and thank you for inviting me.